This comes from constructiontrader.eth. Please smash that like. And here's what he reported. This was actually a few days ago. Some of you guys saw this, right? Very bullish. But I love that somebody actually captured this, right, in the interview. So it says, listen to this guy's language here. True. We are in need of a worldwide open source operating system. Worldwide open source operating system? I wonder where we can find one of those. He says QNT. We have the opportunity now to invest in the framework of the financial system while the architects are still drawing. I'm going to share this with you guys because, I already reviewed this and I thought, a lot of people bookmarked this and liked and shared and so on. So worth pointing out. Then we'll get to some of the other key things and even give you guys a little bit more of that Quant Papa research. Shout out to him. He might not be here tonight because of the time difference. He's all the way over in the Netherlands. But nonetheless, smash that like, especially for some QNT. Here we go.
I think taking both the question, Augustine, if you look at today's architecture, today's technology platform, which is decentralized platform, today we know how to program money. We know how to write smart contracts. We have many examples of tokenizing assets, may not have scaled at a very subscale level. What you are really putting an argument here now, which will be a huge undertaking, and I'm sure there's a role for private sector to play here. Somebody has to build this open, I presume, open source operating system. A lot of fundamental foundational coding has to be done to build this platform. What role you think private sector will play? Because to both Ivan's question and Sumit's question, I think ultimately the burden of building this open architecture programmable ledger will be given to the private sector to build. I can't imagine how a public sector will build this kind of. There's no example today globally where a public sector has built an operating system on which apps can be developed.
Yeah, I mean, what at least what we aspire to, is, again, as I say, is to build the heart on which different parts could be integrated.
Yes.
And from our point of view, from the point of view of financial authority, what is of the essence? I mean, the real essence of the financial system is money. And I think that's what we need to do to make it technologically malleable enough so that it can be have broader applications. I mean, and it wouldn't necessarily be that different from what we have today.
Okay.
I mean, today commercial banks have already, based on the foundations we have today, the two-tier system that has been there for quite some time, they have developed a lot of code. They have developed a lot of program. They have developed very complex back offices that sometimes you ask yourself, how efficient are they? And it has flourished by itself. But you need to give the key elements on which they can build on. And a lot of the elements to build on also has to do with other activities, like is legal framework, rules, regulation, and so on. So yes, this is a huge undertaking.
And I hope there'll be a lot of private sector will raise their hand to support you.
I hope so.
And and definitely Singapore ecosystem will be excited, given you have announced here.
Private sector, public sector, baby burn more. I burn, baby burn like disco inferno. Augustine, no. The BIS lyrical is taking place. Messing with QNT, it ain't safe. A Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. All right. Let's get into the next part of what we have. Here we go. And basically speaking, it is this right here. Also comes from constructiontrader.eth. And on this one, a little bit more of that QNT, right? So it states this right here. Just double checking the settings. I'm good. The current financial system needs interlinking to blockchain. Well, no duh, right? Quant Network is tried and tested, and it works. Bank of International Settlements alongside the Bank of England have, of course, confirmed this. Everything that was speculative in the past is now confirmed. It's only a matter of time before QNT is in the top 10 crypto market caps. Well, let's be honest about some of this. Maybe number 1 overall. All right, this one's 2 minutes. Listen to the perspective on this one. Smash that like. Here we go.
It's certainly true that we can get some of the functionalities of tokenization of these kinds of programmability functions by interlinking the current system, interlinking the different components of the current system through APIs, for example, application programming interfaces. And we could potentially build quite elaborate networks of these. But what we say in the chapter, and I think this is a very important point, we know from the history of computing and in software that if we go for a more incremental solution, that's going to be easier in the short term. There'll be less upfront costs. The governance will be easier. But at some point, you're going to be held back by the need to remain compatible with the legacy systems. And the more layers you put on top, the harder those constraints will bind. And at some point, you're just better off starting with a clean slate. So what we're saying is, when we think about the functionality and what potentially we would like to do, this kind of unified ledger where we have a central bank digital currency in tokenized form right at the center, it can actually bring about many of the functions in a much simpler way. It's a much cleaner way. The challenge, of course, is going to be more that there'll be a bigger upfront cost. There'll be a longer discussion that's needed to get the governance set up in a way that brings everyone along. So there is a trade-off, and certainly there is no one-size-fits-all. And those who argue that a more incremental solution is best. I mean, there is also some point to that as well. So I would not say that that's a wrong argument, but it's a trade-off.
Yeah, it talks about trade-offs. I meant to share this with yesterday's deep dive video about, can Jasmine scale and so on. And in that, it talks about 3 key things. This actually came from, I don't know if it was either MIT or BNY Mellon. Excuse me. That doesn't sound right. Carnegie Mellon. Sorry, sometimes read so much I get those two mixed up. Nonetheless, it mentioned that, for instance, there was 3 things, right? So it's like, security was one of the things that mentioned, and but you had to it says something like you had to have 2 of these. You can't have all 3 of these. And it basically mentioned security. The other one was decentralization. And the third one was kind of like what he was talking about, that trade-off, right? Technically speaking, you can't have all 3. But is that really true? Can you eventually have all 3 to solve what your wants and needs are in regards to programmability, interoperability, all these great things that we all hope and dream for? But many years ago, I guess, with older layer 1 solutions and so on, that, of course, is some of the walled gardens, the silos that Gilbert Verdian was talking about. So I want to show you guys just a little bit more to this. And again, this is also from constructiontrader.eth. Give him a follow. He specifically goes into some detail about some of this stuff. So, we talk about 2030, obviously, quite a bit here at CTN. A lot of times we focus a lot about 2025, and for a lot of us, right, by the end of 2025, that should be like the height of the next bull market, right? This 4th boom cycle. What's that going to pertain, and what's that going to look like, and so on. But 2030, that gets brought up quite a bit lately. Well, he states, as in constructiontrader.eth, by 2030, blockchain will have billions, not millions, but billions of users and trillions of dollars running through its veins. If you think about this, I think he's right. Currently speaking, we're sitting at about 7 trillion, give or take. We had to, of course, get, modern census to basically gather information. And, at least here in the United States, that's once every 10 years. But what about on a global scale, right? So currently speaking, we're at a little over 7 trillion. Obviously, by 2030, we'll have some new census reports. So you might very well see the number is up to like 8 trillion, could possibly be 9. You never know. But yeah, we will have billions of users and trillions of dollars running through its veins. Quant Network's Overledger will play a massive role in, of course, helping finance to become fully interoperable. You literally seen that, right? The central bank of central banks, as in the Bank of International Settlements, choosing Quant to be the one. Bank of England chose Quant to be the one. And, an honorable mention to, for instance, the Electronic Trade Documents Bill being signed in the United Kingdom by King Charles. That's big, right? But when will that actually go into place? Like the full implementation of that. Like, it's one thing to, go from having a bill and then have it become an act, right? Actual law. But when will like these things actually, what are the big dates? And then go from there. And also see some of these things be, like here's this new cool thing we have, like, and the less steps that we have that are being put in place and so on. So I do like this statement, and this is a true statement, especially if you've done your proper research when it comes to Quant. It says, Overledger will play a massive role in helping finance to become fully interoperable. Already mentioned that, but for them to use Quant Network, they will need to buy QNT tokens. And it talks about that, you know what I mean? Like, and for some people are like, well, I saw some people, this ruins the whole concept of, the QNT token. This takes away from the utility of it. No, keep in mind, it just converts, if you were to pay in fiat, it converts it to QNT token anyway. And we understand that, you can switch with the operating system as in QNT to, for instance, like Ripple's XRP for real-time gross settlements and so on. There's so many different hundreds of layers of utility that it's crazy. Anyway, this goes into a little bit of detail. We have been talking about Finextra lately. Let's play this. It's a minute and 32 seconds, and then we'll jump into the next part, which I believe is from Quant Papa.
What are we up to with that trend? Yeah, it's a really good question and very timely for us at Citi, in the department that I work in, Citi Global Insights, because we just published a big report on tokenization and blockchain. It's titled Money, Tokens, and Games, Blockchain's Next Billion Users and Trillions in Value. Now, like you said, the potential for tokenization via blockchain, and has been talked about quite a lot in the past. And we think blockchain is quite different to other types of disruptive technology because it enters the sphere of money and value, and it enables us to transfer money. Now, we're not at the point of mass adoption, because to be powered to mass adoption, it needs certain things. It needs the support of big ecosystem players as well as their involvement. So sovereign institutions, big financial institutions, big corporations, etc. And it needs collaboration amongst different participants, standardizations of platforms, interoperability, and compatibility with existing technology and software. So it's going to take some time. And blockchain is not going to have a, chat GPT moment. It's a different type of technology. It's a back-end infrastructure technology. It doesn't have that prominent user interface, which makes it more difficult to see and feel how it is innovative. But we think we're at an inflection point, and that the growth of blockchain by 2030 will be measured in billions of users and trillions of dollars in value.
Trillions of dollars in value. Yeah, I mean, it's insane, some of the price predictions. And some people who are new, they don't see it, but when they take more of that deeper dive into it, especially based on like certain metrics of, all right, well, what's 1% of, these trillions of dollars of that institutional money coming in and so on. We talked about some of these things, like BlackRock and Fidelity in itself. I mean, that's $10 trillion in assets right there. If you only took 10% of that, that's basically double our current market cap of the global overall crypto market, right? And that's just those two. What about like add in another 20 or 30 different institutions? That is absolutely massive in itself. We talked about the whole thing of was it Corda a few days ago, and some of those connections and so on, and what that brings. That's why there's such a big deal about that. I'm going to get to the next subject that we have in regards to a little bit more of that QNT. This one comes from Quant Papa. Go ahead and share the screen on this one. Please give him a follow if you haven't done so. Yeah, keep in mind he had to kind of start over. but nonetheless, he did get quite a few people following him again, which I'm really happy about that. He is up to 655, still probably about half of what he used to have or more. But nonetheless, I do like that he's still trying. He's not going to let the whole thing get him down. But look what's mentioned here, and that is specifically QNT supercharges Wall Street with the over ledger. Let's jump into it. You've seen some of these interviews and so on. You know, this is a little bit different type of segment, right? And then we'll show you the bottom part in regards to JP Morgan that was reported about, I think, 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe the 28th. Yeah, 2 days ago. All right, smash that like. A little bit more about Quant supercharging on Wall Street with Overledger. Here we go.
So what could that mean, Gil, for the Quant network in terms of value, in terms of expansion, in terms of just business? Given that you have this pluggability now with a trading platform that's already got the door open to a vast network itself, what does it mean to have that first mover advantage?
Yeah, it's kind of like we're the infrastructure to enable this to happen, and so our code and our technology will be running kind of, if you think about it, Wall Street. It'll be running how institutions trade. It'll be running how people do settlements and stuff across networks, and how you can move a JP Morgan coin with a Wells Fargo coin. I mean, we can make that happen.
Do you think Wall Street are even aware of just how big not only the Quant network, but just this technology is going to be and how relevant it's going to be in the future?
Yes, they have recognized, and I think it's only been in the last 6 months, 9 months, they have recognized the potential. They've been looking at it for the last couple of years, thinking, what is this? Is this good for us? Should we look at it? Now that they see the potential, and they're all in. I mean, it's reshaping how Wall Street operates, because it's not a technology benefit only. It's actually a business benefit. So you get access to more investors, more institutions, more assets, more markets.
Right.
And so for them, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. I mean, have you guys seen the latest Overledger trailer, right? They have quite a few. Always continues to impress. I get chills sometimes even just watch it, like a feel-good chill, if you will. Anyway, I'm going to jump back to the bottom part of what we have from that video, because there's a little bit more. I was talking about what was reported from the 26th. It goes into some of these key highlights, right? So I want to share this with you guys. And, this is actually from the official Quant network, 133,000 followers. And it goes into mention this on the 26th, right? So Gilbert Verdian, as we know, was featured on CNBC's Crypto World, right? I showed you guys that deep dive video talking about that, showed the exclusive. And here's another thing, right? So it says banking giants such as JP Morgan and Citi want to supercharge Wall Street. Again, you gotta love how Quant Papa takes these snippets from the past and ties it into the present. Beautifully done. I do the same thing on, like, what? Proof in the pudding? The Jasmine video, the Jasmine QNT video last night, right? You got to understand what they built in the past, right? To give you an idea of like where we're at in the present, right? So that's a different type of subject, but nonetheless, look at this quote. This technology has the capability to revolutionize financial market infrastructure, says Umar Farouk of JP Morgan. We make it simple, right? So I'm going to pull this up, and Quant Network basically says, learn more about how Overledger makes tokenization simple, trusted, and future-proof. All these things are literally mentioned in that trailer, right? And I might play that trailer a little bit later. It's only like a minute or so. Really good feel-good moment, if you will. But I'm going to show you guys this for a brief moment. And on this one, this was on July 21st, if I'm not mistaken. I thought I would just kind of show it to you guys. So let me pull this up. Let me see if I can play it. It comes from Crypto World, and it's basically how banks like JP Morgan and Citi want to put Wall Street on a blockchain. Smash that like. Here we go, because this is exactly what Gilbert Verdian was talking about a few years ago.
This is the New York Stock Exchange, where investors make upwards of 1 billion trades in a single day. Many of those trades happen in a matter of milliseconds, except not really. Trades on Wall Street actually take days to settle, and lots of people to make them happen.
Take market makers, for instance. They're the middlemen handling all those trades on Wall Street, and the top 5 market makers handle nearly 30% of all trades.
The truth is, these intermediaries help with volatility, but they also create a gap between buyers and sellers in markets. And there are a lot of gaps throughout the financial system. Ever noticed how long some bank transfers take?
If you think about infrastructure, and I mean large-scale financial infrastructure, globally or nationally or whatever, it is actually a highly siloed infrastructure, generally speaking. So money moves on one set of rails, assets move on a different set of rails, et cetera, et cetera.
Banking titans like JP Morgan, Citi, and Goldman Sachs think they have a solution. They want to push the American financial system into the next generation, and they need to borrow a tool from crypto, blockchains, on which they would tokenize various assets.
Digital first economy that we're moving towards is really important. As our clients embark on this digital journey, being able to move money 24/7, 365 in a programmable fashion with always on is what we really want to enable our clients.
Analysts at Citi actually think tokenization using blockchains could become a $5 trillion industry by 2030. So why do these big banks think blockchain technology can turbocharge the financial system, and can they actually pull it off?
Let's be clear, tokenizing isn't exactly new.
Well, we've been tokenizing assets in the financial markets for literally hundreds of years. When you think about a traditional stock certificate, is nothing more than a token that represents ownership of a piece of a company. This old asset was a bearer asset. If you wanted to transfer it to somebody, you would sign it on the back, hand it to them, and then they were considered to be the owner.
Electronic trading and modern payment processors have accelerated the global financial system to move assets much faster. But Wall Street still operates on what's called T+2, or trade plus 2 days. That's how long it takes for assets and cash to change hands. You don't have to be an investment banker to feel that lag in our current system. ACH transfers, credit card refunds, all kinds of money that moves through our economy takes time to go from one person to another. Part of the slowness is due to just how many steps and people are involved. On Wall Street, for instance, brokers help set up a transaction and they can charge a commission. Then market makers connect brokers to the assets they're trying to buy or sell. They charge a fee too on the difference, or spread, of the asking price of an asset and what someone is willing to pay. Oh, and huge transactions will need to go through even more steps for security and fraud prevention. Some big banks are hoping tokenization on blockchains can streamline the process of trading assets and maybe make it cheaper.
We've always believed that this technology has the ability to really revolutionize and rewrite financial market infrastructure. Whether that infrastructure is to move money, securities, any other kind of asset. So despite all the ups and downs of prices and crypto and all that, I think we've been pretty consistent that the technology itself has a lot of power to rethink financial infrastructure.
To get how tokenization works, we need to talk a little bit about ownership in the digital era. Right now, it's hard to transfer ownership of real-world items over the web. Sure, you might, say, buy a car through an online marketplace, but the title that proves you own it will come as a piece of paper in the mail a few weeks later. In the hopes of bringing ownership online, developers are creating tokens that represent real-world items.
The great thing is we can do this with almost any kind of an asset. It could be a traditional stock or bond. It could represent ownership of a building. It could represent ownership of a car. It can represent ownership of virtual property in some game land.
Once you have these assets that are tokenized, there's so many different use cases for them. You can put derivatives on them. Obviously, you can open it up to the masses, whether you're tokenizing something as simple as maybe real estate, to other use cases out there, even securities as well.
The banks backing this technology think it could expedite trading across Wall Street and maybe create new investments altogether. That's why they're putting their money behind it. For example, JP Morgan has Onyx, a blockchain platform it launched in 2020. In the short time since then, it's handled $700 billion in short-term loans through its private blockchain. JP Morgan says it's a killer app for the future of finance.
So we have a platform called Onyx Digital Assets, which is, you can almost think of it as a general purpose tokenization platform with money that's provided through our our money solution, which is called JPM Coin. And now, because you can tokenize the security and you have the money on the same infrastructure, you can potentially do a transaction for 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 2 hours.
And Larry Fink, the CEO of investment giant BlackRock, called digital assets innovation in tokenization the next generation for markets.
A blockchain is basically a database of all the transactions. We got plenty of other bits of database technology out there. So what is it makes a blockchain database sometimes preferable? Well, for one thing, you have many copies of the database. That helps keep it secure. Each block is cryptographically signed with a hash function so that any tampering is immediately evident. And you have a consensus mechanism to control how you update that database. Now, this is very useful in situations where a lot of people want access to the same data, but they want to make sure it's the right data because other people might not necessarily get it right.
You basically have this capability of collapsing these siloed infrastructures into one global infrastructure where you can move value, you can move assets, you can move information, and all of a sudden a lot of the inefficiencies and friction that exist in the regular financial world start to disappear just by virtue of the fact that everything is a token that looks like the other tokens on the same distributed ledger, and the same information is being shared across various large players.
And blockchains are meant to be transparent, supposedly cutting down the need for intermediaries that could charge fees or have to do extra due diligence. Proponents say that it could enable peer-to-peer transactions across many parts of the economy. They also say it could allow for brand new forms of ownership, like splitting or fractionalizing, ownership of property through real estate tokens, or tokenized deposits in bank accounts to allow for quick transfers of money between people using peer-to-peer transactions.
Depending on how the token is constructed, it might be divisible into smaller pieces, so you can trade a little piece of a house or a car. Or it could be non-fungible and represent complete ownership of something like a piece of digital art.
And not to mention the holy grail, tokenizing stocks. The IMF said in February that tokenizing stocks and bonds could cut trading costs, but requires the money paying for those assets to be tokenized as well, leading to banks making tokenized checking accounts for faster payments. But even with all that promise, how realistic is it that this will actually get implemented?
So you're definitely seeing a lot more experimentation. What we're seeing as a result is a gradual movement forward. This is not going to happen in a year. It's not going to happen in 3. It's going to take some time, and I think it's going to be a lot of it's going to be baby steps.
If banks and asset managers want to participate in the modernization of financial markets, they'll have to adopt blockchain and tokenization, according to Bernstein. In a report from June 2023, the firm said it sees $5 trillion of real-world financial assets being tokenized on blockchains over the next 5 years. Attempts to deploy blockchain tech in traditional financial markets have been bumpy. The industry tried to use it for tokenization back in 2015 and 2016, but the hype faded. The financial system is one of the most regulated industries in the world, and making changes is slow going. Multiple agencies like the SEC and the Treasury would have to get involved, and big bureaucratic government agencies are slow to change. In the SEC's case, officials there are super skeptical of crypto and blockchain technology after the collapse of crypto businesses in 2022. They just sued Coinbase and Binance, 2 of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. The agency is also considering alternatives to speeding up Wall Street. It just approved a transition to T+1, which would settle transactions faster. That new rule would go into effect in 2024. There are obstacles overseas as well. The Australian Stock Exchange actually gave up on its plan to use blockchain for its infrastructure after a study found its test program needed an overhaul. Regulators there decided it just wasn't worth it.
ASX said, hey, we're going to do all our post-trade processing on blockchain. And they went through a very large, very expensive process to re-engineer what happens after a trade. If you understand the plumbing of how markets work, it's pretty complicated for how the ownership interest of the buyer gets transferred to the seller and the money gets from the seller to the buyer. There are plenty of people who are keeping separate databases about that transaction. And that's sort of a natural area where blockchain, has potential. But even ASX said only 10 or 15% of that particular project was blockchain, but the project was an utter failure.
With that in mind, the New York Stock Exchange might be one of the last places to implement this technology.
If you're trying to apply blockchain to a very high performing asset class, so I mean, think about equity trading. I mean, equities trading is extremely high volume, very low latency. It's a very efficient market. I'm not really sure that you can replace some of that infrastructure with blockchain and get a gain out of it. Or on the other side, you can think of some really, really complex classes like syndicated loans, which are extremely complex and tons of people have to sign off, lots of people have to agree. That may be too tough to solve with the blockchain. So I fully agree. I think blockchain solves a subset of the problems, and the rest of the problems either can be solved better through a centralized infrastructure or through some other means or a consortia or something like that. But it is definitely not a cure-all.
What will really determine if tokenization on blockchains take off is if people and businesses see a benefit and maybe don't even know they're using blockchain at all.
I think adoption of like most technologies, and then the less friction it is, the less obvious it is to a client, the faster the adoption. So you think of like Apple and the iPhone to be able to kind of like that one-stop shop and like, being able to, do everything from banking to shopping to commerce to having it. It's frictionless. So for our clients, like they're not going to want to know that they're using a blockchain, or they want to know that they can have always on 24/7, 365 programmable money.
All right. Think about what was mentioned for a brief moment. The middleman, right? Basically, is it like that middleman to Wall Street? Well, how do you have a middleware, right, to Wall Street? Well, check this out for just a brief moment. And we talked about this, of course, obviously, in that deep dive from last night. But, I want to show you this because, it was kind of a nice thing to kind of reference, right? So here it is. And this actually comes straight from the Quant network, right? And like you see right here, what's it say? Plain as day. Favor interoperability options that provide a layer of what? Blockchain abstraction, middleware to your applications. Like, I'm not making it up. And which handle the complexities of interoperating across blockchains. Now, Gartner, I don't know if you guys follow them on YouTube and so on. They do a lot of like that documentary style, I guess you could say educational content about different technologies and so on. I actually use them in one of my other deep dives, not the previous one. But Gartner Inc., as you can see right here, right, it says hype cycle for blockchain back in 2021. Of course, you can learn more about Quant Network and so on. But yeah, that middleware, right? Now, there's, of course, Morpheus Network, like, Tokenizer was talking about, right? They're like a middleman as well, but not exactly the same type of thing in regards to Quant Network, right? I guess you could say that they're the middleman when it comes to supply chain. Now, when we jump more into this, I want to show you guys another key finding here real quick. It talks about, middleware or middleman, if you will. And this one is referenced, of course, from Reddit. I use Reddit for, my crypto tool belt, if you will, my utility tool belt. Crypto Twitter, Reddit, other sources, right? You got to. You can't count on the mainstream to educate you on anything. Quant Network will be releasing enterprise add-on services which provide additional features which can be consumed as middleware. These will be released with updates. Well, that already happened, right? But nice to, of course, validate some of these key findings. Just to jump back to a little bit more of what we have, I'm going to show you guys this. This comes from the one and only Tokenizer. In my opinion, he's the GOAT of research. A lot of times we have these little charts for you guys, right? So I'm going to full screen this one. You guys have seen in the past the ones that we've had. Nice to get a little update on some of this stuff, right? So this one is really cool. I've gone ahead and liked and retweeted this. If you follow me on crypto Twitter, at DPG Maximus, you can definitely pull this off of my Twitter if you like. But look what's referenced here. Earlier we were talking about Hyundai. We were talking about Kia, right? So look at this. Automotive already, right? The industry innovations with blockchain tech. Okay, this again comes from Tokenizer. You did a really good job with this. You have, for instance, Blocks, .move, Mobi, BMW, Volkswagen, Jaguar. But the ones that are the technologies are part of that. Energy Web Token, IOTA. I believe that bottom one is but Constellation DEG, the Air Force connection. Logistics, we're always talking about logistics, right? You have VeChain, obviously Morpheus network, right? A lot of people feel as though if you own VeChain, you should own both, right? If I'm going to own Stellar's XLM and Ripple's XRP, I should own, those two go in hand, right? VeChain and Morpheus network. People feel as though those go both in hand. I also like how XDC is part of that mix of logistics because it is the trade finance industry. And if anything, look what happened with that, right? So you see UPS, FedEx, again, like these are big names that we're all familiar with. On the bottom left, it's kind of hard to see in regards to the government. You got ISO, obviously, it's not just 222. I mean, there's so many different ISO standards. Gilbert Verdian created the ISO TC307 standard for Quant's Overledger platform. But even government, back to I mentioned earlier, you got some of these other ones, right? We just talked about, Constellation DEG, that was on the top, but LACChain, we understand what Quant's doing for the government of, I should say the government, but the Latin American countries through LACChain, providing them the services of the underserved or no access areas. How about legal IP, like, compliance? Remember how we talked about IPv with Casper? Well, there is IPv, right? Left center, you have Casper, obviously I just mentioned that. Hedera, I was criticized for saying KPMG is not part of any of this. Well, eat your heart out, Mr. You-know-who. I'm not gonna say his name anymore. KPMG is referenced right there. I wasn't making that up. I don't make up anything unless I gotta have something to back it up. Why? A person's gonna see through it if you don't have something, if you can't back up what you say. All right, media, right? Meta. I'm not a big fan of Meta. I think most people aren't big fans of that either. There's Vice. How about some of the multi ones, right? Obviously, Algorand, IOTA. Again, KPMG's listed anyway. Casper, Hedera, LACChain, Inatba, right? IBM, Constellation DEG again, Quant. And then look how it's all tied in. Automotive, track automotive life cycle, history. I'm not going to read all of this, but identity. You know how many times we talk about, like, especially on yesterday's deep dive about identity, how is Jasmine going to scale and what layer 2 blockchain solution are they going to use for that layer 2? But if anything, provide some sort of identity, right? So he literally says self-ownership of registered ID, tamper-proof information, increase distributed security. It's one thing to talk about Society 5.0. It's one thing to, talk about the Internet of Things and so on, but what current platform do you have that's going to help you be able to accomplish some of these things? Hence why we did mention centrality the other day. All right. So I feel as though that's a pit stop for Jasmine when it comes to scalability, because there's only 1,000 TPS. Future maximum scalability, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron. I mean, the whole point of scalability is to scale higher and higher and higher. But yes, Overledger. And look at all the compliance, legal IP, banking, finance, cloud. Always talking about cloud, healthcare, Ripple's connection to Care Project, Jasmine's connection to Care Project, other ones, obviously, insurance, license, registry, logistics. We gave you those examples, energy, media, real estate. We'll give a shout out to you guys that own Rio, the tokenization of real estate. Even Quant, I did that update about their tokenization of real estate. We haven't done a deep dive about Propi yet, their tokenization of real estate. All right, let me come back into the frame, but the key thing is understanding some of these key things. Why does it matter, and what cryptocurrencies are tied into these specific blockchains, these distributed ledger technologies? Hedera, for instance, is not even a blockchain, right? It's that gossip protocol, the hash graph consensus. Dr. Lehman Barrett explains it so eloquently, right? It's a beautiful thing. I'm glad to be invested in that. Hence why Hedera still ranked my number 5. All right, I'm going to show you guys just a tad bit more from the one and only Tokenizer. Please smash that like. And if anything, he's trying to do his brand awareness. Thought I'd kind of help him out a little bit in that regard. He mentions some other key things here. The blockchain industry continues to see rapid adoption. It does. You know, every company and sector shown in this mind map has begun adopting / building with blockchain in some way or form already. True. And of course, you can learn more about this, right? He's got this whole thing at the Tokenizer network. You should join him. I would recommend it. People call him the GOAT of research. He is. He is. He doesn't just cover one, right? I understand some people like they really do well. I will give a shout out to Crypto Hole. He does an excellent job of covering like, you know, Stellar and XRP and, you know, a little bit QNT and so on. I'm telling you flat out though, when it comes to like all of it, all the ones that like are, you know, you want to diversify your portfolio, you think you own a good amount of crypto. Like I think I own a decent amount. I don't own all of it, right? I need to own a lot of this stuff. I'll be honest. I don't own all of it yet. I own a good amount, but I need to get myself some Morpheus network. Maybe I finally do, you know, get on the train for VeChain, right? I know I need to own some DEG, right? I know need to own some Caspa, and I will here soon. But, you know, there's some other solid, good ones here. I had obviously recently joined up with IOTA. I was more than glad to triple my bag of Algorand. The Energy Web Token. I mean, for tokenizer to come on our show and say, Energy Web Token Max is my number 2 right next to Quant. Like, I don't take that lightly. Trust me, I don't.